Hold up, I ain't trying to stump, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen.
Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you wasn't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back.
Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, forget it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you can live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Yes, sir. We are back. Round of applause for yourselves. This is your guy, Marcellus Ease. We got a few things on the docket for today. We'll take a look at the fallout between Glen Taylor and Alex Rodriguez, along with his business partner, Marc Lore, as their situation gives us a sneak peek on the billionaire level of some of the games that get played when it comes to contract verbiage and clauses. We'll hear directly from Alex Rodriguez, Marc Lore, as well as Adam Silver in regards to the situation. Also, Klay Thompson sat down with Draymond Green, where he reflected on his current struggles throughout this season and gave some insight on his upcoming free agency as the Warriors embark into their postseason and perhaps one last dance for the Dub City crew. And speaking of a player who never got his last dance with the team he won a championship for, Jrue Holiday yet inked another extension. And this extension is perhaps the final nail in the coffin to the benefits of the Bucks making the Damian Lillard trade. And finally, Trey Wingo gives us great insight to the media landscape and some of the shakeups that had happened within ESPN, and how the trickle-down effects from the 2020 pandemic had changed the habits of not only on-air talent, but audience consumption, as well as the sports leagues themselves, of what they want from their network deals when it comes to distribution, accessibility, and the networks having the ability to collect data on their audience. So current Minnesota Timberwolves owner Glen Taylor had a fallout with Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez, two business partners that were trying to make the purchase of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And this whole situation is a series of conundrums where it touches different aspects of the economy, the tech world, as well as the business world, and of course sports. But we'll go over this layer by layer, as we'll hear directly from Alex Rodriguez and Marc Lore, as well as someone who used to formerly do business with Alex Rodriguez when he tried to purchase the Florida Marlins. And finally, we'll hear directly what Adam Silver had to say in regards to the matter. But the way things are playing out in public in regards to these two parties, it gives us a rare look into bad business dealings or just fallouts on the billionaire level. These things are normally handled behind closed doors, but there are definitely some fundamental differences between Alex Rodriguez and his business partner versus Glen Taylor. Not only there's an age gap difference, Glen Taylor being 82, Marc Lore being 52, and Alex Rodriguez being 48, but in the times that these men have acquired their wealth and how they acquired it is completely fundamentally different. Glen Taylor not only having the 30-year difference in age, but he has the upper hand in 30 years of business dealings in an era when the American business landscape was more hands-on, more industrial, more, more liquid. Men who controlled industry not only had employees that you could physically see get paid by the thousands, but they also have facilities that created product. Glen Taylor has over 65 manufacturing facilities around the world. So this is business outside of just the inflated net worth of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Some of these things are more liquid, and you can see it play out no further than his workforce. He employs over 10,000 people outside of the Minnesota Timberwolves. But when you look at the tech business bubble in the past few years, companies like Facebook, who really only employ about 200 people, but yet have the market cap and the evaluations of some countries. And a lot of these things tend to be tied up in inflated valuations in stocks. Again, keep in mind, we're in an era now where the billionaire status has become very similar to the Hollywood star in the Walk of Fame, in which now, come to find out, most people in the Walk of Fame made either some sort of donation or funded some sort of campaign pitch so they could be there. And it's very similar to the Forbes magazine and the billionaire status. And a perfect example of this is Forbes magazine giving Kylie Jenner the billionaire status. See, in today's landscape, these things are really marketing tools that can help a lot of these public figures get more sales or increase their net worth over time due to that visibility of just quote unquote getting the billionaire status. Glen Taylor comes from an era where men of industry had their net worth tied up more into their assets or their ability to buy out their competition. And this part right here comes real handy in this story, as Glen Taylor over the years has acquired 187 companies. So he's used to eating up competition, and he has all that history throughout all those transactions to kind of understand contract language, which is not the same history Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez have. A lot of their net worth is tied up to the venture capital money that they raised for a lot of the startups that they're involved in. But Alex Rodriguez and his partner Marc Lore spoke about protecting their reputation ever since Glen Taylor in the start of 2023 were on the attack about them not having enough funds to purchase a team. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
There are basically two dates in the contract. There was the date at the end of December to exercise the option. There was the date, March 27th, to have submitted to the league, signed subscription agreements. There was an automatic 90-day time period that was triggered when we sent the stuff to the NBA by the 27th to give the NBA time to approve us. So we're just thinking that we're marching along. We had a great conversation with Glen, Becky, saw them at the game, had a great text exchange with Glen, and we're just absolutely surprised that we just basically got a nuclear bomb dropped on us on the 28th. And there's really no basis whatsoever legally for breaking the contract. We talked to Wachtel, which is our law firm, who tells us it's an ironclad contract. You had 90-day extension automatically. They never gave us any, made us be concerned even the slightest that this was a possibility. It's that crystal clear in the contract. And so we're just surprised, shocked that he would do this to the fans, to the city, to the players, right in the middle of this epic stretch run. And just really, really disappointed, and think it's selfish and really disingenuous.
I couldn't say better myself. I mean, we were ready to close on March 27th. The league still has to run their process. They have a board of governors meeting, I believe the 8th or the 9th. And the only thing left, Dane and Kyle, is approval and funding. And we're ready to do it now. We were ready to do it last week. We expressed this to Glen Taylor.
So to further elaborate what Arod said right here, they had a $300 million commitment from the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm, but the league did not approve it. So another pre-approved firm that the league already is used to dealing with is where Arod and Marc Lore had pivoted to, but we're not sure if they actually submitted this paperwork in time. Now, the details of this deal was them putting up 20%, and everything was agreed on in 2021. Keep in mind, interest rates were real low. Venture capital money was flowing around. The tech companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and just a lot of startups, they weren't really jumping through hoops back then to get funding. But now everything at Silicon Valley is flipped upside down, especially with interest rates going up. Assets like basketball teams are inflated. We've seen the Charlotte Hornets sell for $3 billion. So right then and there, you already know Glen Taylor, his eyeballs are up. He's like, damn, my team is worth a lot more. These guys are struggling to make payments where the interest rate was already low to what we agreed back in 2021. Not only that, I'm selling the team for a lot less. I'm collecting a lot less interest. And just around the corner, after the NBA negotiates a brand new TV deal, they're going to expand to 2 other teams. So with the possibility of Vegas and Seattle coming in, once everything gets sold and created with those 2 franchises, the owners get a net sum of cash. So every owner right now, let's just say if the team sold for about $4 billion, they could be looking at $300 million check for each of them. So Glen Taylor possibly is going to miss out on that money by selling the team. He undersold his team for about $2 billion. And at the same time, he's not collecting any interest. And these guys are still fucking struggling to make payments. Yeah, he's going to have an issue with that. $1 today is not $1 tomorrow. And that same dollar from 2021 is probably worth really like 75 cents today, especially when you add on opportunity costs. The time spent on not having that dollar to invest in 2021 of what it would have made all the way in 2024. So Taylor might have a little seller's remorse, but at the same time, these guys got to close this fucking deal. They got to be on their P's and Q's. So going back to the initial details of their contract, they were supposed to put down 20% up front at the start of this venture. Then they were supposed to put down another 20% in the beginning of 2023. And by the end of 2023, they were supposed to put down 40%. So they already started fucking up by the time they were supposed to make their second payment of the 20% in early 2023.
He very quickly replied to both of us. Thank you. Appreciate it, Glenn. Nice and short. At that point, Marc and I said, okay, we complied by exactly our obligations. Glen Taylor acknowledged it. We're ready to fund. Now we're just waiting on the NBA approval and funding and his game set match. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes this nuclear bomb. And by the way, all this should be done privately. The only reason we're here is because we've been attacked. And this is a childhood dream for Marc and I. And our lawyers tell us that we have an ironclad agreement and we'll never relent. I mean, we will fight for our dream. We will fight for the fans of Minnesota, the team, and really protect the fan base from Glen Taylor.
That was very interesting wording that Alex Rodriguez had used right there. Protect the fans from Glen Taylor. Now, I'm not going to lie. Glen Taylor has had a bad history of being an NBA owner. But again, the media games these guys are playing with one another, especially Glen Taylor putting the word out there that these guys did not have enough money. But interesting words coming from Arod to protect the team from Glen Taylor, because the same private equity group that got rejected by the NBA that was supposed to help Arod and his business partner bring in about $300 million, their interest agreement actually had leaked out. Once again, the games that get played on this $1 billion level, it should be behind closed doors, but this is all spilling out. So the agreement between Arod and his business partner with that private equity was for them to reduce the salary of the T-Wolves starting in the summer of 2024. That was one of the things they laid out as far as them reducing expenses and making sure that this team remains profitable. And it wouldn't shock me if this paperwork leaked out from Glen Taylor's side. But again, we're seeing the games that get played out in the $1 billion level.
We're emotionally connected. The last 2.5 years, we put our heart and soul into this, and we think we helped get the team to a really good spot. We're vying for first place tonight with 10 games left. I mean, that's an incredible spot to be in. We can't take full credit for that, but certainly we're a big part of it. And we want to bring a championship to Minnesota, and we want to, do whatever we need to do and use all means possible to ensure that this is a smooth transition to control of the team.
Now, Arod and Marc Lore have put in great effort into improving this Minnesota Timberwolves team, as they went even as far as stretching out and recruiting Tim Connolly, the executive out in Denver who assembled that team with Jokic and Murray that ended up winning the championship in 2023. But these guys were able to recruit Tim Connolly to becoming the president of basketball operations in Minnesota back in 2022, which has really worked out well for the Minnesota Timberwolves. But even though swaying Tim Connolly to join the Timberwolves was a great recruitment, at the end of the day, money talks, and A-Rod was asked about some of the tardy payments.
I mean, we've complied with all our obligations, right? You've heard a lot of noise, Dane, around the last two tranches. And trust me when I tell you this, if there was any issues, Glen Taylor would have stepped in and canceled the deal. But because there was no issues, you can scream, you can holler. At the end of the day, we closed. You can scream, you can holler. We closed. You can scream and holler a little louder now because the GP is changing. And this is his loudest scream because he knows if we go out and get approved, then it's game set match for him. So this is very predictable. But the last two tranches haven't been much different than this one, except not as loud because there was less recourse.
There was a lot of unnecessary noise and fabrication of a narrative. We submitted, at the end of December, the option to exercise in both cases, and we had a same thing here, 90 days, and in both those cases, we wired the money, that we needed to wire on time. Alex and I, 90.
Now, once again, they had to make 3 different payments. So what payment is he referring to? I'm pretty sure Marc Lore right here is referring to the first set of payments, that initial 20% down. But overall, the first 2 payments was $600 million in total. It should have been that. The thing that's playing out here is that last initial payment, and also when they had to put down the second 20%, there was an issue going on with them finding funding just for that part. We're not even talking about the final 40%. Once again, they were supposed to make 3 different payments. Initially, at the signing back in 2021. They're supposed to put 20% down. Then they were supposed to put a second 20% down, but delays kept on happening where that second 20% was due in February of 2023. So what went on for almost a year and a half that took them so long to make that second 20% payment? And the final payment of the 40% of the 1.5 billion was due at the end of 2023. It got pushed back all the way for a due date of March 27th of 2024. So the initial deal was made all the way back in 2021 when interest rates were still relatively low. It's 2024. I mean, come on. This deal couldn't be any better for Arod and his partner. What's taking so long to close? Because throughout all these delays, we've even seen teams like the Charlotte Hornets sell for about $3 billion. So if the Hornets are worth that, what are the T-Wolves really worth? And the purchasing history doesn't really take that long. We've seen the Phoenix Suns owner purchase his team within a 60-day window. Same thing for the Milwaukee Bucks. We've seen Jimmy Haslam and his wife come in and purchase that team within a month turnaround. So almost 3 years at low interest rates. So all these delays start to look funny after a while. It's almost like these guys are making a 30-year mortgage on a team. It's either you have the money or you don't. $1 today is not $1 tomorrow. Come on, man.
Percent of the cash in the first two tranches came from me and Alex personally. So it wasn't even, we have one LP, a friend of ours that we brought in. That whole narrative about us not having the money and all this stuff was just incorrect.
What about the third tranche?
Let me add one more thing on the. So Dana, both Marc and I have already invested hundreds of millions of dollars each, at least, on this contract. So we're all in. I bought a home there. I'm going to be over 50 games. Tim Conley recently told me, because I've never seen an owner come to many games on home and on the road. You're at Portland, for crying out loud, and in Cow's country. But let me just tell you what's going to happen, right? The contract is exactly the same in quarters, right? 20%, 20%, 40, and 20. Next year around this time, you're going to hear that Marc and I don't have the money for the last tranche. And December 27th, we're going to send a letter to the league, and we're going to close on exactly pretty much the same date. But you won't hear as much because by that time, we should be the GPs already. But this is going to be the exact same thing. People are going to be confused around December, January, February. But it's exactly the same. And there's just misinformation out there, but we've played exactly by the law. We believe a contract in America, you have to honor it. So,
see right here, Arod is making a mistake right here. Yo, Glen Taylor is 82 years old, man. Over 187 companies he has purchased throughout his lifespan. He has a team of lawyers who have an understanding and just contract history overall, man. Like, these guys will put language in there to get out of it. And right now, it looks like Glen Taylor might have an out in which he could leave Arod and his business partner owning about 40% of the team, or just a little under that. But them just owning that small percentage of the team is actually going to leave them on the hook for any type of liabilities that comes the team's way, such as luxury tax payments, any revenue losses for the year that they have to cover. Arod and his business partner will be liable according to the percentage of the team that they own. So not only Glen Taylor got his money, let's just say they bought the team at 40%. They made the first two payments. What's that? Of $1.5 billion, that's about 600 million. So Glen Taylor got an influx of 600 million in cash. He got them also on the hook for any liabilities to the team. He's still the majority controller. And with the NBA expansion coming through about a year from now, he's going to be able to still cash in when all the other owners of the other 30 teams get paid out. So it's a win-win. And he also gets to participate in the team's inflationary value. He purchased a team in 1994 for 94 million. Now, in the last 2 years, it went from 1.5 billion to about a $3 billion valuation. So this right here could be a complete win for Taylor. Again, his corporation outside of the Minnesota Timberwolves have purchased over 187 companies throughout its history, and a lot of their assets are tangible. So if anybody knows their way to finesse and finagle out of this deal, it's going to be Glen Taylor.
we don't see any benefit by closing 3 weeks early. He still would have figured out something that we tripped on so he can get the team back.
Yeah, and Wachtel is happy to go on the record, go on air, talk to you guys. I mean, this is ironclad contract. This is somebody who just decided, you know, I'm going to break it and sue me. I don't know that. I've never been sued. I've never sued anyone. I don't know what that is like to just say.
Wow. I don't know if Marc Lore right here is lying. You mean to tell me you've been involved as a person who sold subsidiaries and startups to Walmart and Amazon, and you've employed a ton of people, you've had HR departments, now you're entering the restaurant business, so you have even more employees, more HR, and you've never been sued? I find that very hard to believe.
I'm just going to forget integrity, forget the partnership. I'm just going to break it and say, sue me. That is not a game.
You know what? Marc has probably never been sued, but his entities have been sued, not necessarily him. So this is good wordplay right here. Of course, he could say, I've personally never been sued, but I'm pretty sure his companies, even from an HR standpoint, you definitely had to have been sued if you employ a bunch of people at least once or twice. Come on, Marc, you're 50 years old. You've been running these companies for years.
He apparently does know that well, and he's playing it again. But why would we, feel like the need to do it earlier if we thought everything was sort of by the book? We gave Carlisle, time to work through the NBA approval. We had a backup plan in case that didn't happen. We wanted to give Carlisle as much time as possible to try and get a positive result. And at some point we had to say, I'm really sorry, but we need to enact sort of our backup plan, which we did on the 21st. So we were just being nice and trying to, give them an opportunity to get there with the NBA. And
by the way, we were talking to Dow Capital for over 2 years. So they were ready to go. They were chomping at the bid. When we called them,
Now, Dow Capital is a private equity firm that has already been pre-approved by the NBA. So a lot of limited partners that are trying to make the full purchase of these teams and they need a little funding, the NBA is already used to dealing with that firm. But once again, people at Arod said we were talking to Dow Capital for 2 years. That means they were seeking funding for 2 years on an agreement for a purchase that was made back in 2021. So just through this statement alone, you already see that they did not have the funds. They're hopping around from equity group to equity group, as they were with the Carlisle group at first, who committed $300 million to this whole venture, but the NBA did not approve of that private equity firm. So that's why they went with Dow Capital.
and by the way, we were talking to Dow Capital for over 2 years. So they were ready to go. They were chomping at the bid. When we called them, great, we're ready, let's go.
Just in general, have you and Alex spoken yet to Adam Silver or anyone in the league about this in the last 24 hours since this nuclear bomb was kind of dropped?
So I think, listen, we're taking advice from Wachtel on how to approach this. I think the league is in a tough situation because
Now, Wachtel is a law firm. That's the law firm they're taking advice from.
I've never had this situation before. Normally, the buyer and the seller bring it to the league and they present the deal, and then it goes for approval. But if you've got one owner saying, I don't want to sell the team and it's my team, and buyers saying, no, you're in breach, it puts them in a difficult situation. So I think we want to be delicate. We don't want to cause problems for the NBA, problems for the league, and make this, into a bigger thing than it already is. We just want, our legal rights to be enforced, and that's what we're going to do. We just need to figure out exactly how to do that with our law firm, Wachtel.
But once again, that law firm is going to have one hell of a task on their hands because Glen Taylor and his lawyers have history of buying over 187 companies. So you can only imagine out of those 187, which ones were good deals, bad deals, which ones were muscle deals, they sort of muscled their competition out. Like I said, we're getting a peek behind the curtain of some of the battles that goes on the billionaire level. And we're seeing these sub-levels within that billionaire class actually compete and clash with one another. All this really should have been playing out behind closed doors. But Arod and Marc were asked about their current relationship with the team. As in the beginning phases of this endeavor, they were actually allowed to call certain shots. Even though they only put 20% down on the team, they were able to get a presidential suite within the arena constructed. They were able to choose the president of basketball operations. Glen Taylor kind of gave him free range to operate, even though they didn't quite put down the equity to be doing so. But now that things have fallen out, Glen is beginning to pull back the curtain to the point where they're not even allowed in the arena. But they spoke about it. You guys check it out, and every once in a while I'll check in.
Well, one of the things as part of this nuclear bomb that we've got, it's even bigger than just saying that we can't have the team. He's shut us out from conversations with any of the employees of the team, with Tim Conley, with the players. He said we couldn't go into the suite. We couldn't go to walk at certain places within the arena.
Which makes sense. This is all legal. This is actually part of being a limited partner. For all those little micro owners of these NBA teams, none of them could do that. There's certain places they can't go. They can't talk to certain personnel. They can't be in certain rooms where certain decisions are being made. This is all part of being a limited partner when it comes to owning an NBA team. And Glen Taylor seems like he's finally putting Marc, Lori, and Arod in their proper role as being limited partners. He granted them free range, and it's clearly obvious that the business dwellings, when it comes to making the payments, it's been iffy.
So he's really gone nuclear on us, and it just feels very...
No, he's actually put you guys into your proper roles as limited partners. But once again, you see the media games being played. Marc Lore knows he has not gone nuclear. He's actually reduced us to the proper roles that we are as two business partners who only own about 40% of the team, if at that.
Hurtful. I mean, I don't know what other word. I mean, we were partners in this. We together built the team that is, vying for first place, 10 games to go in the season. I mean, it's an incredible story. And we thought we did this together. And then next thing you know, we wake up and we can't bring our family into the games. It's sort of...
Once again, the wordplay, we can't bring our families to the games. They can go to the games as limited partners, but that luxury suite that they had built and all that quote unquote ownership access that they had without putting the real money down, that shit is gone, man.
What crazy. It's never...
And Marc, the lack of judgment of what he's doing is, if that's not bad enough, the fact to be tone deaf enough that to do this bomb on the eve of what could be the most important game in franchise history, at least from a regular season game, at least over the last 5 years, and not do this privately, just tells you kind of where his state of mind is. And that's unfortunate.
Marc, to your comment about kind of being frozen out since this nuclear bomb was dropped, just how does that, in your mind and Alex's your mind, compare to, part of that statement yesterday was, I will continue to work with Marc and Alex and the rest of the ownership group to ensure our teams have the necessary resources. That's pretty much not the truth then, right?
That is the truth. The necessary resources. You see, any liabilities of the T-Wolves now falls on these guys as limited partners. That is the responsibility of them now. They did not make the full payment, so now they fall in line with the other limited partners of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And this applies to all the teams in the NBA, especially when you see celebrities like Usher own a percentage of the Cleveland Cavaliers. This falls under his responsibility. Any losses the team takes, any luxury tax payments, whatever percentage of the team that they own is going to be the same percentage in any liabilities that come to the team. So Glen Taylor was right in that statement. And let's not peep the double finesse. Not only these two guys on the hook for any liabilities, Glen Taylor actually used them and their charisma to recruit high-end executives to work in Minnesota, and possibly to even get certain guys to sign extensions. As we've seen this season, they were able to extend Mike Conley and Jaden McDaniels. So it wouldn't shock me if Glen Taylor used the charisma of these two guys potentially being the new owners to maintain certain people in that work environment. It was already shocking enough they were able to pull Tim Connolly to leave the Denver Nuggets organization that was set up for success for the next 5 to 6 years to go work for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So again, it wouldn't be shocking if Glen Taylor pulled the double finesse.
A memo was sent out to everybody in the organization not to talk to us, and places that we couldn't go in the arena specifically. So that's next level. I mean, it's a nuclear bomb for sure, the contract, but then that's next level to sort of be so disrespectful as to say those things.
How was your relationship with Glen gone over the course of the 3 years? Have there been ups and downs, or is this your first? Because you guys are clearly upset right now. Like,
I can start, Dana. I mean, look, besides the 8 months ago or so when he gave us a Heisman to kind of, stand down, which we did because we want to be respectful to him as always. Me personally, I would check in with Glen at least once a week. I'll get him on the phone, every 2 or 3 weeks just to check in. Nothing, kind of tell him a little bit about what Marc and I are up to, ideas, a little bit about the team, small talk, but just really respectful. So we both thought that the relationship was solid. I mean, it's not like we don't have to be best friends like Marc and I, but we thought it was solid. That's why this bomb he threw yesterday was such a shock and surprise, and especially when you put the timing and then icing us out of the building, right? That just seems like it's not a really nice thing to do to another human being.
I mean, there's also just an integrity issue, right? Like we paid the control premium. So 1.5 was the control price, not an LP price. We paid the control premium on the first tranche. We paid the control premium on the second tranche. And then we're now it comes to control, and he's like, thank you very much. I'm breaking the contract, your LPs. It's like, wait a second. That just from the straight up integrity standpoint.
Once again, why did it take so long for the second payment? The issues regarding the second payment fell all the way in February 2023. That's when rumblings started coming about. But the initial deal was struck in 2021.
Like, that is, I mean, we have the contract on our side, but just put the contract aside for a second. Just straight up integrity. Like, we helped build this franchise to where it is. It's winning. We're winning together. We paid the control premium on the first 2 tranches. And now,
come on, Marc. You know better than that. For starters, you got the team at a low ball price at 1.5. Second of all, not only you locked the team for a low ball price, you locked it at an interest rate that's much lower in 2021 versus current day. And the final thing is, you guys are well aware after the TV deal that the 2 expansion franchises, whoever buys them, are going to end up cutting all the previous owners a check that they don't have to share with the players. It just goes directly to the owners. So this deal couldn't have worked out any sweeter for you. All you had to do is just make the payments on time. And a business deal is a business deal. And the longer this kept on stalling for you guys to purchase the team, the worse it got for Glen Taylor to explain to his other partners of why you guys are buying the team at such a low price. None of it made sense in a business level for Glen Taylor.
you can't come to the arena. Like,
and also guys, like, it's like the spirit of a deal. If you're buying a house that costs $200,000 and you have a 2-year payment or a 2-year whatever, and that house is worth double, you can't go back and say, you know what, we want to take that house back. It just doesn't work. I mean,
you can if motherfuckers making payments too late. The bank could take that house back. Yes, they can.
Who does that? And if the spirit of the deal is to get the deal done versus looking for any hiccup so he can take the team back, that's just not good intention. It's also not good integrity. It's also not the intention of what the spirit of this deal was. And on top of that, thank God,
there's a lot of morality talk coming from Arod. None of those things apply in business. Again, you're dealing with an 82-year-old billionaire who has major investment in Minnesota itself. He was involved in politics over there. I believe he is the wealthiest person from Minnesota. So just him owning the team might mean a little bit more to him than just having that real estate.
we have an ironclad contract.
I wouldn't even imagine.
Can I ask about that, Marc? So there's been a lot of the phrase handshake deal that's popped up surrounding this at different times, from back to Naples when you guys initially met with Glen and Becky. You are saying that all of this was documented in contracts from the jump, signed, sealed, waiting to be delivered. There was anything ambiguous in your mind.
There's nothing ambiguous. The contract is clear cut. I think the handshake is sort of like the addition. In addition to the contract, there's that partnership handshake where it's like, we're going to do this together, and there might be some ups and downs, but we're doing this together, and we're never going to look at the contract again. Like that's what a handshake deal means. It means, yeah, we have a contract, but we're never going to look at it.
Right.
And so that's why it's such a shock, because he never once said to us anything that would suggest that he was capable of doing something like this. And especially in light of like the fact that we've been respectful, we did stand down, we did, drive a lot of the success in bringing in Tim Connelly and all the moves that he's made. And like, there's a lot of things that we worked on behind the scenes around culture, around VCP with Ethan and Ryan. And it was really only, 8 or 9 months ago that we, after he asked us to stand down through his person, we did. We said, it's okay. We understand. And even though it's going to be our team and some of these decisions will impact the team, we said, fine, it's okay. Like, there's never any bad blood. It was more just being respectful of, hey, maybe we did do too many things, to push this team forward. He is the control owner, so we backed off.
And Dan and Kyle, one thing to note is another part of the handshake agreement is there has to be trust in any partnership. You're not going to put everything in a contract, right? There has to be a spirit of trust, and we believe trust is a very important element in any partnership. He did not agree with the Rudy. He warned us against it. He did not want to do that deal, okay? He let us do it, so credit to him, okay? He didn't get in our way. The big one was Tim Connelly. His quote to Marc and I was, "Why are you wasting your time? People like Tim Connelly do not come here." Okay, we said, let us take a crack at it. Marc and I went to work on it. 3 months later, we're having a press conference at our practice facility.
Right there again, that's part of the double finesse. I wouldn't be shocked if Glen Taylor saw some of the charisma that these guys had, and after locking down Tim Connelly, transferring some of that energy into the player personnel side to get Mike Conley and Jaden McDaniels to re-sign.
To take all the credit now is not only disingenuous, but is a plain lie. And I'm shocked by the way how comfortable he is making these statements.
Keep in mind, we're at a huge disadvantage being LPs with the NBA rules. We're not able to say as much on the record as Glen can as the control owner of the team. I think along the way we've been sitting in the background and things are coming out, but we're being very sensitive, not causing problems with the NBA, not wanting to get caught up in drama. We just thought, hey, Glen's our partner. The press is the press. We know who's doing it. And it's just going to play out. It'll take control and all this will be over. So it didn't really seem necessary, and it didn't seem to take on that risk of upsetting the NBA in any way or doing anything we weren't supposed to do as LPs. I think we've come on the record now today because we should be the control owner of this team, and we have to defend ourselves. And now it's pushed beyond the point of being able to sit back and just let the press do what it does.
Yeah. And Dan and Kyle, what we've done is we've taken the approach collectively, Marc and I, like we're juniors in high school, right? We know that our time's going to come and we're going to be seniors and we'll get to go to senior prom or whatever. But we want to be respectful, A, to the NBA, and B, to Glen Taylor, because you know what? He's older than us. He's had a tremendous business career. He's been there for 30 years. To his credit, he's wanted to keep the team there. And I think for that, I give him a lot of credit. But the only thing that has gone wrong in our deal, and just make it very clear, the team is worth a lot more than $1.5 billion, and he has a problem with that. And he's embarrassed to his LPs that are putting a tremendous amount of pressure on him, which he admitted yesterday in his press tour.
As he should. See, here's another conundrum. You can imagine Glen Taylor as an 82-year-old billionaire explaining to his other investors of why is it that he's getting finessed by two guys half his age.
But it was fair value when the deal was struck. That's the thing. Like you said on a house mortgage, you give a mortgage on a house, it's your house, right? And you can't take it back if the house goes up in value. And we signed a deal where it escalated 4% per year, which was, by the way, a lot higher than the 1% interest that we were at back in 2021. And it was a fair deal, and everyone was very happy with the deal. And we worked our butts off to help, build value in the team. I don't even think we anticipated this quickly to be this successful, but I think Tim has just done a phenomenal job. I mean, literally, built a world-class team in a very short period of time. And, the valuation's gone up, and it is what it is. And we benefit from striking that deal, but it wasn't an unfair deal that we struck at the time we struck it. It was just the opposite.
And Marc, let me remind the guys, because we haven't really talked to them on or off the record. But just to be clear, Dan and Kyle, we were ready to close that deal as is. Glen Taylor said, I would love to be in control for 2.5 years. So then we structured a 4-year payout. Why would we pay 100% up front and let him be in control for 2.5 years? And that's exactly what we did. And we've played it.
It wasn't your idea. It was his ideas.
Yeah, because he wanted to be in control, Dane. That's why a lot of other teams that were wanting to buy from Glen Taylor, a lot of other pursuers, couldn't get there because they wanted him in and get him out, right? And we were saying, okay, fine. You know what? This is actually a benefit. We can learn from Glen Taylor. And by the way, we have learned a lot from Glen Taylor. That's why it's so disappointing that we've been so gracious and we've done everything by the book. And when he told us to back up, we backed off because we're juniors, not seniors. But now it's time to pass the baton, man. It's time to pass it.
Now, Arod right there might be a little bit disingenuous because Glen Taylor has been putting up this team for sale for the last 20 years. And he's already had history of having a few dust-ups with other people trying to make the purchase of the Timberwolves. And Alex Rodriguez and Marc Lore said in the beginning of this interview that they were warned about doing business with Glen Taylor. So yes, they did elect on skipping out, making 100% payment and letting Glen Taylor control the team for 2.5 years in order to stretch out the payments in a 4-year stretch. But at the same time, these guys are hopping around from private equity firm to private equity firm within those 4 years. So them stretching out the payments really helped them out. But unfortunately for them, Glen Taylor, he went back to his old finessing ways, and just seeing the interest rates just go up and inflation doing the same, particularly for sports franchise assets, the deal over time just didn't really make sense for him to complete it. And it's not shocking that he tried to find any type of wiggle room to get out of this deal, while at the same time using these guys' charisma to recruit a highly ranking president of basketball operations to work within this franchise, and at the same time leaving Arod and Marc Lore on the hook for any liabilities on this team as a limited partner. It looks like Chef Curry's not the only one cooking it up in these basketball streets. Glen Taylor working that spatula, boy, because he flipped this deal in a complete 180. So former Miami Marlins president David Sampson spoke on the business dealings with Alex Rodriguez, as previously he tried to purchase the Marlins, but to no avail, didn't have enough money. He gave some great insights as it pertains to this situation, and he wasn't surprised that this really didn't work out. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
So let's take people back before he was having illegal practices in Minnesota, before he bought a house and pretended he was from Minnesota. He agreed to buy the Timberwolves at a price of $1.5 billion in 2021. But it was something called a step transaction. A step transaction means you lock in the value today, but you pay over time. And there are deadlines contained within the purchase agreement that you have to make your next installment payment by a certain day. And Arod has missed just about every deadline. And Glen Taylor has been okay. He said, hey, we'll extend the deadline. Don't worry about it. But meanwhile, the price of basketball teams have skyrocketed since 2021. So the Timberwolves are no longer worth 1.5. Let's say they're worth about 2.5. So that means that Glen Taylor feels terribly that he sold the team at 1.5 when he could have sold it at 2.5. But he was in a contract, nothing he could do until Arod missed another deadline. And there were rumors that the Carlyle Group pulled out. And then 10 minutes later, Arod had another deal with another private equity company. And it was all horse hockey. Arod has never been able to come up with the money to finish this transaction. So today, Glen Taylor said, Ganug, guess what, Alex? The team's not for sale anymore. You violated the contract. What he also said in the release is, hey, if they want to come back and talk, we can keep talking about selling the team. But guess what? An official wait to see here on Le Batard's show, courtesy of Nothing Personal. If the team is sold again by Glen Taylor to Arod, it won't be for 1.5. Because I've been calling this for 2 years. Because I negotiated with Arod to buy the Marlins, and he had everything except the money. And so it was always going to be an issue, and he wants to be an owner so badly that he pretended he wanted to be in Minnesota, but he never was able to hit a deadline. And finally, Glen Taylor said, you know what? It's cool that you're Arod, but money's way more important.
What was Marc Lore's role if not to be the money?
Marc Lore was brought in to be a percentage of the money, but he had given his allocation at the first go around. So he was never going to be part of the increased finishing the installments. It always had to be OPM, other people's money. And Arod's been out raising money for years and just has been unable to do it. And here's why. Arod could have borrowed money and gotten investors at the $1.5 billion number. But Arod always was trying to make a Beckham-like profit like Beckham did in Inter Miami. He was selling pieces of the team at numbers higher than 1.5. And people were like, hey, why do you get this incredible benefit of having such a low basis? And now it's all done.
Arod was never going to get that type of leveraging power that Beckham got here in the States. Beckham was the face of soccer here in the States at some point, trying to elevate the sport. And the initial buy-in for MLS teams were at a low enough price for guys to make a profit. NBA teams, ever since Arod struck this deal in 2021, prices just keep going higher and higher. The owners who came in and made those purchases locked up those teams within a 60-day window. That's pretty much been the trend. And the teams that were purchased, those for way more than $1.5 billion. I mean, the Suns were purchased for $4 billion, the Milwaukee Bucks were purchased for $3 billion. Same thing for the Dallas Mavericks. So Arod right here looks like the odd man out. But David Sampson further elaborates on how Arod and his business partner are now minority owners. And again, like I said before, Glen Taylor, he's good at flipping shit with the spatula, because this deal took a complete 180 and now he's highly favored.
He is a minority owner. There's two ways it can go. They can, and you have to look at the contract. So contracts can have two different provisions. One can be that if any installment payment is not made, then the entire contract is void and the money gets returned to the investor, in this case, Arod. It can be returned with a premium. They can maybe go to appraisal if the team is worth more since the first sale. So Glen Taylor has to give Arod a little bit more for his money to get that money back. Or it can be that Arod stays as a limited partner with the percentage he already owned because he made those first installments. So I don't know what the contract says, but it's one of those two things.
So it wouldn't be a bad deal if they got their money back. They would get it at the inflation price that happened in between 2021 to 2024. But where there's a yin, there's a yang. If the Minnesota Timberwolves next season, especially with Karl Anthony Towns' contract, go over the luxury tax threshold, and any team net losses or just any penalties occur, Arod and his business partner will be on the hook for those liabilities according to the percentage of the team that they own. Now, as these teams' evaluations keep climbing higher and higher, at some point, there's not going to be enough people to come in and close out these purchases within a 60 to 90-day window. So this is where the NBA finds itself in a conundrum, because at some point, they're going to want to welcome in private equity funds or just hedge funds to come in and buy up these teams so the evaluations could continue climbing up higher and higher. But David Sampson gives us some insight on how it normally works when owners come in who have enough equity to close out these deals.
Well, listen, the number one straightforward of all time was Steve Ballmer.
Yeah, cash.
He went to the ATM, took out a couple bill. Sterling was gone. Ballmer was in. It was a dream come true for Adam Silver. But the number of people in the world who can do transactions like that is very, very small. So when the value of the assets of these teams continues to increase, you need groups of people. Like Bruce Sherman has a group of 10 or 20 people helping him do the Marlins transaction. When you look at what David Rubenstein just did with the Orioles, they listed all of the limited partners. You're putting together 20 million pieces of 20 million each. You need a lot of money, which is why the NFL is looking into allowing sovereign fund money, and basketball and baseball already do allow it, because you want to keep the value of teams increasing. To do that, you have to find big chunks of change from people who don't want control. And in the real world, an individual doesn't want to give you $300 million toward the purchase of a team and not be allowed in the clubhouse, or not be allowed in an owner's meeting, or not be allowed to make a trade.
That's exactly the position Alex Rodriguez and Marc Lore find themselves in right now. And this is all after they already gave $600 million.
It's super hard to put these deals together now. I think you have to look to see who the governor is with Cuban and the Mavericks, and I'll bet you $1 the governor is not Mark Cuban anymore. It is the son of, I think her name was Miriam Edelson. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting, George Steinbrenner once said something to me because what he said was important. And for him to say it, there's nothing more limiting than being my limited partner.
But with Arod, it seems like he had issues finding a private equity group that the league would approve. As right here, we're going to get some insight to some of the reasoning of why the initial private equity group who pledged $300 million was rejected, or allegedly was, because eventually come to find out, there are rumors going around that this group actually pulled out of the deal.
Now, David, one of the things you mentioned the Carlyle Group earlier. That was the original team the original firm that Arod had secured financing through. Axios had come out with a report saying that they were out because some of the stuff in their portfolio ran afoul of the NBA guidelines, bylines, whatever, right? There's another report that came out and said, no, they weren't denied, they pulled out. Either way, I don't care what the truth is. I just do want to know, for a sports league, a major league sports, like MLB, like the NBA, what would be the type of things that would be in these rules and guidelines where someone else's portfolio would run afoul of?
Well, funny, it used to be gambling. That was the big thing that they looked for, that if anyone was associated with any sort of casino or gambling, they were not eligible to be a limited partner. There is tremendous background checks that go in when you become a limited partner in baseball. There is full background, full check on who you are, who you're associated with. You've got to pass through the ownership committee, the executive council, then the full vote of the owners in Major League Baseball, to say nothing of the commissioner's office. So they're looking for any dealings, but let's be honest, Steve Cohen's background wasn't exactly perfect. He had been in the middle of some major suits, some major workplace issues, some major SEC violations. And guess what? If the price is right, Bob Barker, we're going to find a way to approve you. And so I believe that Carlisle pulled out, and it's not that the NBA turned them down, because these leagues know now that when you find chunks of change, you really need to take it, because the commissioner, who wants his job and wants to keep his job, wants to keep the value of the teams going up. And to do that, you need lots of people with lots of money.
And speaking of the commissioner, Adam Silver was asked about whether the league had jurisdictions to intervene in this whole situation.
Where do things stand with the situation with the sale of the Timberwolves? And at what point would the league get involved with that?
It's not clear whether there will be a role for the league to get involved. Where it stands is Glen Taylor on one hand as the seller of the franchise, and then with Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez as the buyers, they have a purchase agreement. And there's a dispute now in the purchase agreement. And in their purchase agreement, they in essence pre-agreed to a dispute resolution mechanism that includes mediation and arbitration. And that's where it stands. There is no role for the league in that process.
AKA Adam Silver works for Glen Taylor. And this scenario is actually going to play out according to the contract. And if I was a betting man, I would say Glen Taylor is going to come out on top. But Adam Silver was also asked about the claims that Arod and Marc Lore made about the NBA's pending approval would trigger an extra 90-day extension into that contract.
Two quick Timberwolves questions. One, Alex and Marc have said that the only thing holding up their deal was NBA approval of the financing and the money. Can you clarify or confirm exactly where that stood when Glen announced that the deal, in his view, was off?
I can't say more other than that comment is at the heart of their dispute. And again, the dispute is precisely that, as to whether they had acted within the window of the option that Glen Taylor had sold them. I mean, that's the very basis of the dispute. And so that dispute will be resolved independent of the league office.
Got it. And then secondly, this was an atypical deal from the outset. They had not raised the money. Glen wanted 3 years path to control. Is this a deal structure the NBA would approve in the future, or does this necessitate a rethink about what types of structures allow you to buy NBA teams moving forward?
That's an important question. I think this deal happened in the early days of the pandemic when it was extraordinary circumstances.
And keep in mind, the league did borrow over $800 million during the pandemic to keep some of the teams afloat. They were able to secure a low interest rate from one of their, it's either advertising partner. They didn't really elaborate on who it was, but it's already a company that works with the NBA. And at the same time, they're very institutional. They're accredited investors. So the NBA got some help staying afloat. Things were iffy during the pandemic because a lot of teams were already losing money before then, like the Detroit Pistons. But now with the rate of inflation going up the way it has, a lot of the assets have gone up in value, particularly sports leagues, as well as the franchises. And the impact has been so great that it has even had a trickle-down effect. We see leagues like the WNBA and the MLS have gone way up in value.
For everyone in our community, I think lessons learned too, that as new situations evolve in the league as to what kind of transactions make sense. I think let's wait to see how this one works out. But it's certainly not ideal to have a stepped transaction like this. I mean, it met our rules from that standpoint. But you know, and it's what Glen Taylor wanted, and it's what they were willing to agree to at the time. But I think once the dust clears, you know, on this deal, it may cause us to reassess what sort of transactions we should allow.
So there you have it. $1 today isn't $1 tomorrow. And a situation like this normally would play out behind the scenes, but we're getting a peek of some of the battles that goes on with the different tiers of billionaires, quote unquote. And from the outside looking in, it looks like the old timer of Glen Taylor at the age of 82 is not going to allow himself to get finessed by two multi-millionaires whose net worths definitely got a boost through startup evaluations. But at the end of the day, is only a fraction in comparison to someone who has tangible assets not only throughout the world, and also has an employee base outside of the Minnesota Timberwolves of 10,000 people. Some of the biggest tech companies of today don't even employ more than 300 people, i.e. Facebook. But hey, this is a multi-layer situation ranging from the old industrial billionaire versus the tech billionaire who has high net worth evaluation based off his company's stock or just speculation. And at the same time, inflation comes into play, especially after the last few years. The values of NBA franchises climbing up so high that the league might have to reconsider and allow private equity to come in to buy up some of these teams. But when it comes to Glen Taylor, he definitely flipped the switch on Marc Lore and Alex Rodriguez, as it looked like they had the upper hand. But now not only he was able to secure an influx of cash, but also sharing the liability of the impending luxury tax that's going to hit the T-Wolves next offseason if they keep Karl Anthony Towns. The games that get played on the billionaire level, it's just something to be said. So Klay Thompson had to sit down with Draymond Green, and perhaps for the last time as teammates, as they reflect on their current season together, the ups and downs, and Klay Thompson's pending free agency. Now, it's leaked out to the public during the trade deadline that the Warriors had contacted the Lakers about LeBron James, and the only salary that would end up matching was Klay Thompson's. But this brotherhood has been one to remember, but like all good dynasties, it's eventually going to come to an end. And the beginning of that started in the 2019 NBA Finals when Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant had went down with injuries, but due to Stephen Curry revamping his body, elevating his game, he was able to lift that Golden State Warriors team in 2022 to yet another NBA Finals. But that dynasty ship is beginning to crack beyond repair, and examples of this is the departure of Bob Myers, the off-court issues with Andrew Wiggins, and also the fallout of Jordan Poole with Draymond Green, which led to him being traded. So like all good dynasties, we may be seeing one last hurrah, because best believe with the new CBA coming up, along with Klay Thompson kind of proving his value at the end of this season, there are going to be teams out there with enough cap space and who are starving for a shooter. Teams like the Orlando Magic, the Philadelphia 76ers, and to a degree, the Oklahoma City Thunder. So Klay entering this offseason will be unrestricted. Along with the NBA salary caps going up, he'll be able to leverage a decent price for his services. But the two brothers of the Dub Nation had a nice conversation, reflecting on their great moments and their recent struggles. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
You have a free agency coming up this summer. And, you know, and speaking of playing with, you know, you for the last 12 years, with Steph for the last 12 years and what we've built here, things change. You know, the NBA changes, cap situations change, this thing changed, that thing changed. As you go into free agency this summer, what's a priority to you as you look at, you know, the next 3, 4, 5, whatever you decide you want to play, as you look at kind of the last segment of your career, if you will, what's important to you as you embark up on that?
I just can't believe it's here. Like, when you're in your mid-20s, it's so crazy. You think you're going to play forever, really, and you think you just maintain that athletic level that seems effortless. Oh, but then as time goes on, you really do realize how demanding this job really is, and it's so physically demanding. And I was actually struggling with that a lot in the beginning of this year because of the unknown, you know? I mean, I might have let contract situations or playing time or just making up a lot of excuses rather than just appreciating what is in front of me. And it took me and Steve like 4 real heart-to-heart talks to finally break my shell, being like, you know what? I gotta have fun this year. I deserve to have fun. Like, we worked so hard to freaking win these games and play into June and have fans on the road. I mean, my first couple years, there might be a few Steph Curry jerseys in the crowd. Now it's like a whole contingent of Warrior fans on the road. It's insane. So I was kind of grappling with that a lot this year. It's almost like your own mortality as an athlete. Like, man, I might not be able to elevate like I once did, or I might not slide my feet left and right like I once did, but I can still be a heck of a player if I just give gratitude and keep that perspective. Like, I'm out here balling.
And some of us forgot the hell of a player that Klay Thompson was in his prime, still dropping his 20 points per game, while most nights he'll go from guarding Damian Lillard to the next night he'll be guarding Westbrook. Then the next night it'll be James Harden. He was asked consistently night in, night out to not only score, but to guard the best perimeter players.
Because that was hard for me these last few years when you go through injuries and you're so used to playing at a certain level, guarding a certain guy, shooting certain shots, and then you have to adjust all of that. That was the hardest part of my career. And it's still hard for me, you know, when I'm used to scoring 25 in a quarter, locking up the best player. Now I gotta pick my spots a lot more just precisely, which is fine. I've finally come to accept, like, look, I can still be a heck of a player. I can still be incredibly efficient. And as long as I'm having fun and being a good teammate, and you actually helped me a ton when you're like, lean into these young guys, lean into the fact you're a vet.
And lean into that guy Podziemski. Boy, that's a brand new dynamic that's happened with the Warriors. That guy is coming for Klay's minutes right there. And some of the fallouts with some of their lineups with Andrew Wiggins and his off-the-court issues, he just seems to be almost half himself. It's almost like we're asking, where the hell is the Andrew Wiggins of 2022 in the finals? The guy that was getting double-doubles and just being a defensive pest. Along with the issues of Andrew Wiggins, we are seeing the rise of some of the younger players, guys like Kuminga actually putting Steve Kerr on blast this season so he can get more playing time. So the young pups are coming up and they're beginning to bark to get some more of the minutes, especially as some of the vets begin to age.
X amount of money, you don't have to worry about nothing. Like, you're playing for the love of the game. And I think once I realized that and I relax a little bit rather than trying to play for a contract or an all-star nod or some accolade, but rather just play for the love of the game and the fact they get to play cards with the guys on the plane. We're playing ping pong last night after the game. We're having fun. That's the beauty of the game right there. Not trying to get another max deal or another endorsement, but just smelling the roses and appreciating all the work it took to get here.
Yes, and it's definitely been a long road for Klay, and he has to look at what's going on with Jordan Poole in Washington. Of course, he's getting paid the big bucks, but he looks very miserable over there, and to a lesser degree, he's getting exposed in a way. In order to be the man, you're going to have to deal with all the attention that comes with it, and we're seeing Jordan Poole actually struggle in that role. So that's also a question that Klay Thompson is going to ask himself in this offseason. Is he ready to venture out on his own and perhaps carry the load? Will his body hold up?
And in saying that, when it comes to free agency in July, I just got to keep that in mind. Like, yes, I want to re-sign with the Dubs, but I also have to prioritize my mental health and, you know, lay out what is important to me at this point in my career. And I know we have so much basketball ahead that I haven't given it much thought, really, because if I start thinking about July 1st, then I'm just doing myself a disservice. I'm not here. I'm not thinking about the Hornets tomorrow and these must-win games this weekend. So,
and that's another thing with the Warriors. The predicament they find themselves at right now, it's going to be a tough road. Right now, they're the 10th seed, and it looks like they're going to be in the play-in against the Lakers. And they're going to have to participate in another play-in matchup just to get the 8th seed to either face the Denver Nuggets or the Minnesota Timberwolves. As of right now, it's looking like they're going to face the defending champions, Denver Nuggets. So the lack of size does not draw them a favorable matchup in the first round. That's why I said this interview right here could be the last hurrah, as these two guys wear the same jerseys as brothers.
it's just about staying present, as simple as that is, staying present and appreciating being in the NBA. Because my Uncle Andy always told me, he's like, Klay, your career's going to go by in a snap of fingers, so just appreciate this life you live. It's not a right, it's really a privilege. And, you know, Uncle Andy, he'd been around the game since The Last Dance, so that helped me a lot as well.
Absolutely. In 2019, if you don't get hurt, do you approach your whole free agency process differently at that point?
That's a big what if. That's a wow. Yeah, that was that could have been a definite possibility just because you're healthy. But at the same time, too, if I don't get hurt and let's say we do three-peat, it's like you're not walking away from that.
That part.
You're not gonna. That hasn't been done since Shaq and Kobe, so I never would have walked away from a chance at stacking rings. And man, that was a crazy time. That was the worst, man. You know how long it is to play to the finals. It's such a long grind, and then like you tear a ligament, and then you got to go right back to the gym. There was no like vacation, so that was I was very grateful for my family during that time because I was just kind of lost without basketball and, you know, being on crutches and just having to build all that muscle back in my quad and the atrophy. That was not fun, and especially after that 5-year finals run we had. That's a lot of just mental and physical wear and tear. And I don't think, when I really think about it, if I was healthy, and I don't think I would have really tested it that hard, just because like it's hard to walk away from a dynasty. That's doesn't happen too often.
Yeah, absolutely.
And dynasties definitely do not happen often. And Klay Thompson has made the ultimate sacrifice within that dynasty by being content with being Stephen Curry's wingman. And this sacrifice is very similar to Dwayne Wade deciding to become LeBron's wingman, even though he was an NBA Finals MVP and Mr. Miami. These guys putting their ego aside is definitely a big deal, because they could venture out and be the man on a franchise on their own and earn the money. But hey, we'll see. There's a few things going against the Warriors once again. Their play-in position, and even if they get into the playoffs, who they end up facing in the first round, and also the current landscape of the NBA entering into this summer. It is not designed for teams who have spent money like the Warriors in the past 5 to 6 years. Teams now are going to get penalized for being over the second apron consecutive years in a row. Not only they begin to take your draft picks away 7 years out, but they also limit teams on their roster construction by only allowing them to add brand new players who are minimum paid players. There is no mid-level trade exception, no mid-level exception, and no 2-for-1 deals to make the money match in regards to trades. So you become very limited if you begin to spend money like the Warriors have in the past 5 to 6 years. And this all begins this summer. When you add on top of that the leverage that Klay Thompson has entering into unrestricted free agency, along with the salary cap being bumped up and other teams needing shooters like the Orlando Magic, Philadelphia 76ers, Hell, you can even toss the Houston Rockets on that list or Indiana Pacers. And even the OKC Thunder will have cap space. So he does have that leverage to use against the Warriors. But we'll see how it plays out. Hopefully this is not one last hurrah, but that one last dance is coming for these Golden State Warriors. Can they just extend it possibly another 2 years? But hey, like all good dynasties, they eventually come to an end. So Jrue Holiday was able to secure a 4-year extension with the Boston Celtics. And for the Milwaukee Bucks, it really puts them in a conundrum here because they really got to ask themselves, what was the opportunity cost for getting Dame? Because either way you look at this, it's almost a lose-lose. In a way, that Dame trade definitely secured Giannis's place on the team as he quickly signed the extension right after that. But the Blazers turning around, flipping Jrue Holiday right back to their rivals. Right back to their rivals is really a blow. These teams in the past, I would say 7 years, have been around the same timeline, trying to one-up each other. The Bucks in 2020 sending 3 first-round picks to get Jrue, and the Boston Celtics able to put themselves in a position where they could just send a second-round pick in the contracts of Isaiah Thomas for Kyrie Irving. So these two teams have always been jockeying for position to one-up each other in order to take control of the conference. But the Damian Lillard trade for the Bucks has led to a lot of opportunity costs that if you don't look underneath the surface, you could end up missing. And it's not just about the Celtics getting better. For starters, after the acquisition of Jrue Holiday and now the extension, the Celtics now have flexibility to add additional salary in pretty much the last season before the new CBA kicks in. Because starting next summer, it's going to get harder for teams that have a lot of players on salary, very similar to the Celtics, to add additional salary. So that Damian Lillard trade triggering that opportunity to get Jrue Holiday was really like taking 2 L's for the Milwaukee Bucks. Because of the contracts already on their books with Giannis, Dame, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, it already puts them in luxury tax territory. And I'm only naming 5 players. But unlike the Celtics, the Bucks bench is not only depleted, but some of their main core guys are in their mid-30s. And when you look at the Celtics, yes, they're going to be in luxury tax hell for the going future. But with the Jrue Holiday extension, they were able to save on salary for next season, with him ducking that $39 million player option he had and taking a lesser amount for that current year, and then his contract will continue climbing up the more years go by. So the Jrue Holiday pickup gave him enough flexibility to dance around the cap. Especially when Jaylen Brown's contract kicks in, they'll have just enough room to avoid the liability of the repeater tax. This kind of gets complicated, but regardless, the Jrue Holiday situation leaves the Celtics with enough room to add flexibility to almost in a way future date them paying over $200 to $300 million in luxury tax. They got a little breathing space with that trade along with the extension. Remember, like I said before, this was the final season where teams can add additional salary without the limitations that's going to come along for the summer offseason of 2024. So in a way, yeah, the Bucks did benefit with the Dame trade addressing a lot of their shooting issues, especially during crunch time. But now some of the opportunity cost is bleeding through the surface if they don't pay attention. And a perfect example of some of the opportunity costs I'm making reference to is the Philadelphia 76ers in 2019 when they had lost in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Toronto Raptors. The proper move right then and there would have been to trade Ben Simmons. But the opportunity cost of them not doing that is them losing Jimmy Butler, who would eventually lead a Miami Heat team that had half the talent of the Philadelphia 76ers to 2 NBA Finals in 3 seasons. That's what the 76ers missed out on. And you could also say to a degree, they probably would have never renewed Tobias Harris. They just would have stuck with Jimmy and used that extra money to possibly obtain through trade or free agency another high-profile player. So that's another aspect of the opportunity cost that they missed on. But I gotta say, the Celtics worked this deal out really lovely because giving Jrue a player option in that last year, especially with the cap going up, if Jrue's still a valuable player, he has a way to opt out and possibly get more money, while at the same time he's giving them flexibility to absorb the contracts of Jason Tatum as well as Jaylen Brown. And also, we got to add to that Derek White, who's going to be up for a brand new contract in 2025-26. So you see the way Jrue's contract is constructed, where it starts off slow and then climbs up. It helps the Celtics kind of dip into the second apron of the luxury tax and just having the possibility to dip out of it to avoid the repeater tax. But either way, there's a lot of repercussions for the Bucks making the trade for Dame, because not only they gave up the 2029 first round pick, but now they don't have one until 2031. But with the signing of Kristaps Porzingis, I don't think they've foreseen the Celtics even possibly making a deal for Jrue Holiday, because they're going to be on the hook for about a $200 to $300 million luxury tax bill. But the way Jrue constructed his contract, it delays it by a year. But again, this is the final season when you could add money to the books with a lot more flexibility than if you try to do so in the summer of 2024. And adding money to the books right now is very important for some of these teams, because once you dip into that $190 million threshold for your team salary, the limitations are unreal. It's beyond just paying the luxury tax. Teams become very limited on how they could acquire new players. They're pretty much stuck into giving guys minimum contracts. No mid-level exceptions for brand new signees or for trades. And let's just say something happens in the future, they want to trade Damian Lillard, they can only trade Dame for someone who matches his deal, almost to the exact T. So this is where the Bucks kind of find themselves in a conundrum, not only not having draft picks until 2031, but also becoming very limited as their core players eat up about $162 million of their salary cap. So at the end of it, they only have about under $30 million to spread across 10 players to fill up that roster. And those of you watching the visual version, as you can see in 2026 and 27, just the contracts of Giannis and Damian Lillard alone already puts them at the $141 million mark. Once again, once a team's salary cap approaches past 190, you become limited on the kinds of trades you can make. So those contracts are not going to be easy to move. But for the Celtics, in a way, they're going to face the same conundrums going into the future. But the good thing for them is that they already kind of have their role players, and most of their core guys are in their prime years. And pretty much the only guy that's really going to fall off the books is Al Horford. But this team does have their core players hitting the prime years. And that's the main difference between them and the Bucks. So overall, with this new CBA coming in, the opportunity cost for the Bucks to make that Damian Lillard trade, it was a lot more than just the 2 first-round picks they gave up. They made their fellow Eastern Conference rival a lot stronger, and they pretty much began to tie restraints to themselves of improving their roster year in, year out, going forward into this new CBA. But there's no doubt in my mind that them pulling the move for Dame was also to please Giannis, because once that transaction was made, not only the owner sold the team, but then Giannis signed the extension. So there was a lot going on behind the scenes in Milwaukee. And this is really a trend we see throughout the league, where the current people in power don't really care too much to look into the future, because maybe certain executives and players won't be around anymore. But this is going to be a very tricky dance going forward that the Bucks are going to have to make in order to improve this roster. But for Jrue Holiday, I definitely got to say, he's got one hell of an agent to get 3 separate deals for over $130 million throughout his NBA career for being a fringe tier 2 to tier 3 player. It's definitely kudos to his agent. So with the sports media landscape going through a paradigm shift right now, in which the way they fundamentally do business has to be reconstructed, as the average sports audience is now more fractioned, and they now have the option of consuming sports in various different ways. But while the landscape right now is restructuring, a lot of conglomerates that were viewed as almost Teflon, such as ESPN, are going through major shifts. ESPN has reconfigured things around so much that they're heading full on to direct to consumer with streaming. So a former ESPN anchor, Trey Wingo, gives us very great insight to how some of those impacts have really affected ESPN starting during the 2020 pandemic. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Technology and COVID changed almost everything, right? Like the big example I can give you is 47 days before the 2020 draft, we had this whole stage set up in Las Vegas, and we were all going to be there. And it was this massive live extravaganza, and everything shut down. And thankfully, right around 2020 was when Zoom calls and everything else, sort of Riverside or whatever, so the technology was available to us. And we changed, I went from the idea of being in Las Vegas with hundreds of thousands of people and all this kind of stuff.
The technology in a way was always available. The thing is, the 2020 pandemic forced companies to now have no option but to embrace technology. And in a way, it served as a test run to see if they can operate their businesses without having any offices and going through the expense of flying people from city to city. The pandemic of 2020 almost serves as a forced trial run for businesses all over the world to reduce their margins, while at the same time realizing that they have the ability to still conduct business and make a profit.
Being in a studio by myself, and Mel was on another screen, Booger was on another screen, Daniel Jeremiah and Michael and Kurt Warner from the NFL Network and Mel were on all these different screens. And it changed the way you do business. You didn't have to be there in person anymore. ESPN used to fly everybody from all across the country into Bristol, Connecticut, put them up in these hotels that existed only because
you're calling them a hotel. You're calling it a hotel. No,
well, literally there were hotels all over. I mean, it was awful. But that plane fare, they're not doing that anymore. They'll do it maybe 10% of the time. And the industry is changing so quickly. Technology is moving and evolving so quickly that brick and mortar big time studio stuff is really having a hard time keeping up. And that's why ESPN is investing so much in ESPN Plus and Disney Plus. And that's why you see Fox and ESPN and TNT pooling their resources on these streaming sources, because they know. Roger Goodell said it best at the Super Bowl this year. Someone asked, well, why are you streaming games? And he goes, well, we have to fish where the fish are.
And the fish are really online. And that's what the pandemic has also done to the audience. It changed their viewing habits. They got used to seeing people on Zoom calls do a live show on a network, let's say like ESPN. They don't have to have big time production to get the same viewer engaged. It doesn't look cheap. Everyone got used to seeing people on Zoom calls doing, let's say, a show like First Take or Undisputed. And they sort of had this test run of not having the production level as high as it once was due to everyone being quarantined, but yet they were still able to get viewers to watch these shows and not really question the quality of the audio, or even the fact that the person is clearly sitting in a room in their house and they're broadcasting a full show. So the audience in a way got conditioned to this, and it's much cheaper than these companies flying people out and paying for hotel, etc., etc. And all those offices ESPN has in Bristol, Connecticut, which is already not an appealing place to live in the country, they don't really need all those facilities anymore. So the landscape has definitely changed a lot. And with the online consumption creeping past the old analog / cable TV consumption, sports leagues now have actually better data on their audience when they link up with one of these streaming services. The NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, now all these sports leagues can actually get real-time data on what exactly some of their consumers perhaps maybe like to watch or foods they like to eat. They can get full data on all their customers, where they live, what time do they watch the games, do they watch the replays. The type of audience information they can get from these streaming services versus going to a traditional broadcasting company like TNT and ESPN, that in itself is already worth doing the deal before they even take a lump sum of money. And traditional networks like ESPN are going all in on direct to consumer, aka streaming.
Audiences and younger audiences, specifically younger demographics, are on streaming services. That's why that game was on Peacock. That's why they just announced that a wildcard game will be on Amazon exclusively this year. So that ESPN went from a place you had to be, like it was a destination place. And I want to be clear, ESPN is still a Goliath. It's still fantastic. It's a dynasty. It's the New York Yankees of sports entities. But you don't have to be there anymore.
And funny enough, not only the workers don't really have to be there anymore, the consumers don't have to be there anymore, as well as the sports leagues don't have to be there anymore. Because if you get down to the nitty gritty, these leagues can actually begin to set up their own apps. And in a way, the NFL is already beginning to break ground with the NFL Plus app. They give fans a lot of exclusive access, live in-feed audio to what's going on in the sidelines, and that league definitely has the leverage to stream games exclusively on their own app. They command the highest ad time for any sports in the United States. So even though they're receiving over $110 billion in the next 10 years from these media companies, they're still generating a lot more revenue for those companies based off of their program, which is number one in like over 7 different networks and streaming services. Their leverage is unreal. But again, there's a lot of moving parts, and it comes from not only the consumer side, but the talent side and even the entities. And we could look no further to the relationship between ESPN and Pat McAfee. Networks like ESPN now are more personality based. Their on-air anchors now come in as personalities that can bring in an audience the same way a Dave Chappelle would bring an audience to Netflix. That is the current model now. ESPN has begun to take the Netflix approach, but we'll see how this plays out in the next upcoming years. The shift is definitely real. Post-pandemic, the habits and what people got used to changed, i.e. workers demanding more remote work from jobs instead of a traditional show up at the workplace 5 days a week. So it is what it is. If it's not evolving, it's pretty much dying. But that's all I have for today. You guys definitely hit up the mailbag for any questions you have. And until next time, peace.